So let's try and decode the secret of the so-called Nephilim, these supernatural, giant descendants of angels that the spies came back to report on. And the question is, how does Rashi even know that that's what they were talking about? How does he know that that's what Nephilim mean? Especially when you consider that the very first time in the Torah we ever come across these people, the Nephilim, which is back in Bereshis, at that point, Rashi does not call them the descendants of angels. He just says that they were very powerful individuals and they made bad decisions that brought them to their spiritual knees and had an impact on the whole community, on the whole world actually at the time. Brought everybody down. So why here is he suddenly calling them these demigods, these strange kind of creatures? So context is always the key. When you want to understand how Rashi arrives at a particular conclusion, you have to ask yourself, well, what is Rashi addressing? Rashi's job is always to clarify the simplest understanding of the verses. We thought, and some of the commentaries pointed out, that what bothered Rashi in the verses is the repetition of the word Nephilim. That these are the Nephilim, who are the descendants of the Nephilim, as if the Torah never repeats statements, which is not the fact. Very often, actually, the Torah repeats things for emphasis. Like, for example, when it gives us certain instructions, it will give the instruction in a double expression, just to highlight, how important the instruction is, or the fact that you may have to do the instruction more than one time. But even in the description of individuals or of scenes or of circumstances, the Torah will sometimes repeat the same kind of language. So the fact that it says Nephilim twice in the same verse is not reason enough why Rashi should have to give us this explanation that they are these giants who are the children of fallen angels, and give us the names of the angels and the time when those angels fell from heaven. That none of that is an explanation. What is important, again, context, is you've got to look at the entire presentation that the spies gave, which was essentially in two different parts. There was their initial report. In that initial report, they showed them the fruits that they had brought back and how the fruits were unusually large, which they wanted to use as an argument to say, just like it has strange mutated fruit in this land, it has strange mutated people in this land. And their entire objective is to create fear. And if you want to create fear, you have to give the impression that the enemy that you're up against is a very formidable enemy. Part of that is they're larger than life. Now, they said that. They said exactly that in their original presentation. They said that they saw giants in the land. They already told us this. They already said they saw giants in the land. That's what's caught Rashi's attention, because if they already said that they saw giants in the land, why are they now repeating it? Except this time they're calling them Nephilim, which actually, based on the information we have up until this point, Nephilim is potentially just another word for giants. So you already made that point before. And Yehoshua and Caleb responded to the allegations against the land, including your allegation that they are giants, and therefore we're not going to be able to conquer the land. They've dealt with that. Why are you mentioning giants again? That's what's caught Rashi's attention. Firstly, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to kind of dredge up something that you've already argued and try and repeat it, and maybe repackage it and think that it's going to now be more compelling. And also, how come originally he called them, or the spies called them Bnei Anak, which means giants, and here calling them Nephilim. So that's what's grabbed Rashi's attention. And that's why Rashi believes that these Nephilim are something different to the regular giants. Now, what exactly giants mean, we don't know to what extent the spies exaggerated. We do know that they exaggerated. So it could mean just people who are bigger than us. Doesn't mean that they have their heads in the clouds, right?
Bro, they could well have exaggerated with regards to giants, because nobody really knows what it is. But when they came back with that bunch of grapes that two people had to carry,
yes,
that they saw with their eyes.
True. That's true. So the fruit, there was a compelling argument that the fruit is unusually large, and they wanted to use that as leverage to say, just like the fruit is so large, imagine the people who eat the fruit. So that's how they scaled it up to say that these people were giants. But who knows? Maybe a giant is just somebody who's much taller than you are, broader than you are. Or maybe it's psychological. Maybe it's just that they look like they're such powerful people that you see them as giants. Here they're saying something else. They're saying these are not just simply giants, at least in Rashi's interpretation. These are giants that come from some spiritual realm, which means this is not purely a matter of size. This means that they've got some kind of power that we're not capable of fighting against.
My mind is working in a funny direction. Couldn't those be elements of Hashem?
What?
That are there already? These magnanimous...
Okay, so the thing is, as we're going to see in a moment, what they say in this presentation, this is now their rebuttal against the defense that Yehoshua and Caleb put forward. Part of what they're going to say is Chazak hu mimenu, that the people in Israel are stronger. Now, mimenu is an ambiguous word. It could translate as than us, they're stronger than us. Or as the Gemara says, mimenu, and Rashi quotes it as well, they're stronger than him. Meaning, whatever elements we're describing over here are stronger than Hashem. Now, that's a very strange suggestion, right? How could something be stronger than Hashem? But it's almost the exact opposite of saying these are elements of Hashem. This is something which has the power to, so to speak, confront Hashem. Now, why are they saying that? Why have they suddenly scaled up and brought in this whole metaphysical representation? Let's go back and remember what Yehoshua and Caleb said after their first presentation. Again, the goal of the spies is they want the Jewish people to be afraid. They want them to imagine that this is an impenetrable country and there's no way that you can overcome the people. That's what they want to do. They want to get into the heads of the community and put this absolute pessimism and basically discourage them from ever going into the land. Yehoshua tries to respond, and they don't want to hear anything that he has to say. At that point, Yehoshua does not have any children, and they say, who are you to tell us about our futures when you don't have a future of your own? So they immediately dismiss his arguments. Caleb, on the other hand, Caleb gets in with a very clever little psychological sleight of hand. Because the Torah tells us, Vayahas Caleb esa'am el Moshe, that Caleb silenced the people to Moshe. It's an unusual expression. Silenced them to Moshe. So Rashi explains what Caleb did was this psychological manipulation. He said, you think this is all that Moshe has done to us? And everybody was thinking, here we go. Not only is he going to speak about the fact that Moshe is leading us into a trap, but Caleb's going to probably speak about the other things that Moshe already did previously. Remember, at this point, they've already complained about a few things. So they're expecting that Caleb's going to, ramp things up. So everybody starts listening to what he has to say. And then Caleb says, you know what else Moshe did? He took us out of Egypt. He split the sea. He brought us the man. So it's this, he grabs their attention and then he flips the script. And then he says like this. He says, if Hashem wants, im chafetz bano Hashem, if Hashem cares about us and he wants us, then we have nothing to fear. Sorat silo me'aleihem, you don't have to worry. Whatever divine protection the inhabitants of the land had, has been removed from them. V'Hashem itonu, Hashem is with us. Al tira'um, don't be afraid of them. So he starts building this whole motivational speech, which is essentially saying, it doesn't matter how strong they are. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians were also stronger than us. But that's the point. The point is that we're coming on Hashem's ticket. It's not us versus them, our little group of ex-cons that are now starting up with this powerful series of 7 nations. It's not that at all. We're just riding on Hashem's coattails. In the same way as he brought down the world's superpower of the time, which was Egypt, without us having to do anything. In the same way, when we go into this land, it doesn't matter who they are, how many of them they are, how big their army, how sophisticated their technology, it makes no difference. Because Hashem is going to conquer these people. Now that is a slam dunk, right? At the end of the day, what are the spies supposed to say after that? Remember, the spies are not people who don't have faith in God. They believe that they were given a mission, and they have fulfilled their mission to come back and report on what's going on in the land. So they've done that. And now Caleb is reminding everybody, we're not an ordinary nation, we're the chosen people, with Hashem's blessing and miracles. Don't be afraid. What are the spies? possibly going to respond to that? You could describe the biggest, mightiest, strongest, tallest, giant army in the world. It's irrelevant in Hashem's terms. So now they're snookered, right? So they've got to. So therefore, they bring out another layer to their argument. They say, no, you don't understand. Anything that we've experienced up until now, which includes the miracles of the Exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the sea, the vanquishing, essentially, of the nation of Amalek who attacked them, all of that was just Hashem versus humans, or Hashem versus the laws of nature. So the laws of nature say that water has to flow, and Hashem changes that and makes the water stand up. That's fine, that makes a lot of sense, because all of the experiences that we've had are experiences of things in our reality, the physical reality, which obviously Hashem, who comes from a different reality, can override. But now you need to know that besides the physical challenge that we're up against in this land, there are spiritual beings there as well. We've never done that before. We've never had a battle with spiritual beings. We've never had to fight angels before. So there's no evidence, Kalev, from the fact that previously Hashem has helped us overcome humans to illustrate that Hashem will help us to overcome angels. So that's why they say, no, you don't understand. When we said giants before, we were not talking just about giants in the classical sense. Big, burly, overbearing human beings. That's not what we were talking about. Let me clarify for you. We're talking about Nephilim. And you know who these Nephilim are? These Nephilim are the descendants of fallen angels. That's what the word Nephilim means, which means they don't come from our reality. They're essentially aliens. And they came into this world a long time ago, and that's going to be relevant to the conversation. And their ancestors are called Sham Chazoi and Azael, and that's going to be relevant to the conversation. And you know how long they've been here on earth from when they fell from heaven? All the way back from the time of the generation of Enosh. So you got to understand, we have no precedent. We don't know how this is going to play out. And it doesn't help to talk about the devastation of the Egyptian armies, because those are human. In other words, the spies, Rashi is illustrating, only bring this argument after Kalev has destroyed their original argument. So that's why they've got to go big now. In fact, if you look in the words, the Torah tells us at this point, Vayotziu dibas haaretz ra'a. They brought out slander against the land. It's an unusual expression. They brought out slander. But the implication is they brought more information to light that wasn't originally shared. So, can you imagine being a Jewish person at this time, listening to these reports? It's like watching tennis, you know? So one minute you see that the spies are saying, oh my gosh, this is terrible, and they're powerful, and we'll never overcome them. And they also put in the little bit of psychological manipulation to say that the nation of Amalek is there. Remember them, and remember the tourists they called. Like they've laid it on thick. Kalev comes in one fell swoop, knocks it all down, and says, yeah, but Hashem is on our side. Now the Meraglim say, that's right. But there are also other beings that are superhuman beings, and we don't know how Hashem is going to deal with them. Now, there's a big, big problem with their argument. See, what they're effectively saying is that these Nephilim are descendant from angels. Right? Can an angel fight against Hashem? Now, there are two sides to that question. When somebody says, can an angel fight against Hashem? The one is, does the angel have within them the capacity for rebellion? Humans have the capacity for rebellion because humans have an evil inclination. And therefore, we could go down the wrong rabbit hole, and we could build up resentment, and we could build up rebellion against Hashem. Angels don't have that Yetzer Hara. That other side. That's why the Torah points, or Rashi points out, remember when the angels went to Lot, after they were at Abraham, they went to Lot, and then they were going to help him escape from Sodom. So when they got there, so the Torah uses the expression that he says, V'sa'adu libchem, you should satisfy your heart. says libchem in the singular. When we say in the Shema, we say levavchem, which is actually a plural word. And the reason for that is because as a human being, there's two sides to the heart. There's two forces pulling in two different directions. There's a positive and a negative inclination. Whereas when you're dealing with an angel, it's libchem. This is a single heart because they only have one motivation, and that is to do whatever Hashem wants. So can an angel rebel against Hashem? It's not possible. In order to rebel, you have to have a negative side to yourself, and angels don't have a negative side.
But you did mention that these angels did in a way rebel. Because
The question is how?
No, I'm saying when they came and they got involved with humans and
Understand, but again, the story, the beginning of that story was that these were angels who said that they could also perform the human experience. So Hashem said, go ahead and try. So when they perform the human experience, then they are tempted by the things that the world has to offer. But it's not a rebellion against Hashem, it's temptation. Rebellion against Hashem. Hashem says, I want these people to come I want my chosen people to come into the promised land. How can an angel contest that? Even if that angel is distracted by the things of this world, how could they fight against Hashem? Go one step before that. How could these angels have, in the first place, had a debate with Hashem? Hashem says, you're angels, and they say we want to go down to earth. Like, how does that happen? That's only human beings are capable of having a line of thought that is different to what Hashem wants. How are these angels even capable of having that in the first place? More importantly,
sorry, but what about when Hashem wanted to give us a Torah and the angel said no?
Again, when you hear a story about a so-called debate between angels and Hashem, like in that example, it's not that the angels have a different view to Hashem. The angels are programmed to give a particular opinion, right? That's not a rebellion. That's in this particular context. Hashem wants the angels to put this argument forward. Right? Hashem wants the angels to put forward this argument in order that Hashem can show us the truth. But it's not that they have the ability to rebel against Hashem. They're doing exactly what Hashem wants them to do at that point. Here, we're talking about the possibility of angels rebelling against Hashem, doing the opposite of what Hashem wants. How's that possible? The second question is, let's even assume it is possible for whatever reason. Is it feasible? Can an angel actually stop Hashem? Can an angel? I mean, that's what that's what these spies are saying. Chazaku mimenu. They're more powerful than Hashem. How could they suggest such a thing? How could anything be more powerful than Hashem? It's a ridiculous suggestion. How could an angel have that kind of power? So somehow they have to justify this very radical position that there are these angels with this immense power. I mean, it really doesn't seem to make sense. In order to address that, Rashi tells us you have to know a few things about these angels. First thing you have to know is that these angels come from the generation of Enosh. Now, why is that relevant? It's incredibly relevant. You know, there's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that we learn at this time of the year, where the Mishnah says that one of the things you have to be aware of is da malamaylo mimoch. If you want to avoid doing an aveira, you have to know ma lamayla mimoch, what is above you. And then it goes on to say what is above you is an eye that sees and an ear that hears. But the point is you have to be aware of what is above you. The Maggid of Mezrich offered a different, and it's from the Baal Shem Tov, a different explanation of what da malamayla mimoch means. Da, you have to know, ma lamayla, whatever goes on in the higher realms, mimoch comes from your behavior here on earth. Which means that if we're doing what Hashem wants, then the spiritual realms will align with us and will assist us. But if we're not doing what Hashem wants, then that can cause, even in the spiritual realms, that there'll be some kind of force against us. So Rashi wants us to know that these angels, these fallen angels, their story began at the time of the generation of Enosh. Because what happened at the time of the generation of Enosh, we've already touched on this, that was the first group of people to begin serving some other entity besides Hashem. In other words, these were human beings who rebelled against Hashem in a very extreme way, because to make an idol, in whichever form it was, because as we discussed yesterday, the idols that they had at that point were still just, as they saw, delegates of Hashem rather than independent operators. It was only in later generations that they actually started to give that level of credibility. But the fact is that this is a rebellion against Hashem. So when humans rebel against Hashem, that creates the possibility of spiritual beings that can also go against Hashem. That's why Rashi needs us to know that these fallen angels fell from heaven at the time of Enosh. Because he needs us to know that the only way it's possible that there could be an angel, some kind of a spiritual being, that could push against what we're supposed to be doing is only if we're pushing against what we're supposed to be doing. And there's obviously an embedded message here, because the spies are pushing against what Hashem wants. Hashem wants them to go into the land. He's told them that that's the goal and the objective. The fact that the spies were sent into the land of Israel was really just to find out how, not whether they could go into the land. So the fact that they've come back now and they've said this cannot be done, that means they're now going against what Hashem wants. And the message of Enosh is when there's a group going against what Hashem wants, that produces in spiritual terms, spiritual forces that go against what Hashem wants, and now you can create rebellious angels. And not only that, these are beings who fell from heaven to earth. So once they came to earth, you'd expect that they are now beholden to the laws of earth, right? When they're in heaven, they can behave according to the laws of heaven, but if they're on earth, they should be beholden to the laws of earth. And the laws of earth include such things as death. So what does Rashi tell us? These Nephilim have been around since the time of Enosh. Now, you could say they're spiritual beings, so maybe they live for hundreds of years rather than what humans live for, which is a few decades. But the message over here is a little bit more than that. The generation of Enosh is before the generation of Noach. At the time of Noach, we know that all of those who were the rebels against Hashem were wiped out in the flood. And we know that the flood was not only rainwater, but we know that it says specifically it was Arubos Hashomayim, it was water that came from heaven, which implies that it had some kind of a supernatural impact. It wasn't just drowning people, it's kind of incinerated people. Now we know that on the ark, we know exactly who was on the ark. The animals, the birds, and a small group of people. And the Nephilim were not included. Yet they're still around. So the spies are saying, do you understand who these beings are? They survive even when Hashem wants to destroy them. When Hashem is destroying the whole world, they survive. So now, you're telling me that Hashem destroyed the Egyptians. True, the Egyptians are people. Doesn't matter that they're a big nation and a mighty nation. Doesn't matter, they're people. Hashem can destroy them. But these are Nephilim. And these Nephilim already have proven that they can withstand Hashem's assault. So therefore, don't tell me, Kalev, that Hashem is on our side and we can go into Israel and we can conquer the land. Because when you recognize that the beings who are in the land are such powerful beings, even, so to speak, Hashem can't destroy them. Our hands are tied.
Right, didn't they say that there was one who survived the flood?
Okay.
Who's that?
So that's Oig, and that's a midrash. Okay, but that's a midrash. Rashi here is talking about the pshat. But yeah, that's a midrash. So now you understand what they've done, how they ramped up their whole argument, because essentially what they're saying is, you think that we're dealing with anything like what we've dealt before? We're not. This is a whole different business now. And you've got to prove to us that we have the wherewithal to be able to overcome those that even Hashem's flood could not destroy.
Well, how come